So over the last week, we learned about the retail trade. So we learned about what is trade, and so trade means buying and selling of goods and services. So simply purchasing and selling of products. So we learned in trade we have the domestic trade and international trade. And in domestic trade, we learned we have the retail trade and wholesale trade. And in international trade, we have the import trade and export trade. So we already learned about this retail trade, and today we are going to learn about wholesale trade. Okay, so we learned about what is retail trade, and then the characteristics of retail trade, the importance of retail trades, and the types of retail traders. Okay, so today we are going to start from wholesale trade. So what is wholesale trade? Wholesale trade is purchasing of goods with the purpose of reselling, uh, and that is called the wholesale trade. Okay, if you are purchasing goods for the purpose of reselling, that is called wholesale trade. Now, in retail trade, we learned retail trade is done for the purpose of end consumption. Okay, retail trade refers to selling goods and services directly for final consumption. But here in wholesale trade, what is happening is the purpose is reselling. You are selling it to someone. It is not final consumption. So, what is wholesale trade? Wholesale trade is purchasing of goods and services with the purpose of reselling, and that is called the wholesale trade. A seller who engages in wholesale trade activities is known as a wholesaler. එතකොට මේ wholesale trade එක කරන කෙනා, එහෙම නැත්නම් the person who is doing the wholesale is known as wholesaler. So for example, let's say someone is 50 kilograms of rice to a retailer, or selling a stock of cement to a contractor to construct a building. Okay. Now, when the wholesaler sell 50 kilograms of rice to the retailer, what he does is the retailer is selling it to the end consumers like you and me. Sometimes we are going to the shop and we are buying the quantities as 5 kg, 5 kilograms, sometimes 1 kilogram, sometimes 10 kilogram. So required quantities at the required time. Okay. So we do, who facilitate that? The retailers are facilitating it. So another thing is selling a stock of cement to a contractor. So then actually we could also say not to a contractor, even to a retailer from the manufacturing company. If they are selling a stock of cement to the retailer, then what they do is retailers are selling to the individual customers, individual people. So let's look at what are the characteristics of wholesale trade. මේ තොග වෙළඳාමේ wholesale trade එක කියන්නේ තොග වෙළඳාම කියන එක. In Sinhala terms, it's තොග වෙළඳාම. So what are the characteristics of this wholesale trade? Purchasing goods for the purpose of reselling. Main one being you're purchasing goods for what? For the purpose of reselling. You are reselling it. You are not using it for the end consumption. You are reselling it. Then often selling large quantities of goods in one transaction. Now here, in the previous example, if you look at 50 kilograms of rice to a retailer, but do we ever go to a shop and buy 50 kilograms of rice? No, that is not happening. We are buying in small quantities. But here, what wholesaler does is he is selling a bulk, a large quantity to the retailer, and then selling a few selected items. Okay, now wholesalers are selling only a few selected items. For example, it could be rice. Now, for example, someone like Aralia Rice, they are selling what rice? They are the wholesaler. But if we go to a small shop, small retail shop, okay, what are they selling? They are selling so many things. They are selling rice, they are selling sugar, they are selling dal, they are selling biscuits, they are selling all these milk powder. Okay, they are selling so many things. Okay, but wholesalers, they are selling only one item. Okay, only one or few selected item, and the unit selling price is relatively low. So they sell it at a lower price. Then what retailers does is retailers do is retailers at their profit margin, and then after they are selling it. When we buy from retailers, we buy at a little bit of high price. Now, if you look at now when our parents are buying things, we sometimes have they are not going to the retail shops, but they are going to some large shops where they do transactions in large volumes. සමහරක් වෙලාවට ගිහලා තොග කඩවලට ගිහිල්ලත් ගන්නවා බඩු. Why is that? Because they can buy it at a relatively low price. So sometimes our parents, they are not going to the retail shop nearby, but in the towns they have large shops, wholesale shops who are also selling to normal customers, not just to the retailers who are running shops, but also for the small people. Okay, but there that there will be a problem with the purpose. It is done usually for the wholesalers are selling goods for the reselling, but sometimes we are going to this Togakada and buying it because we want to buy at a low price, but they will be selling to other retailers as well. Okay, and providing trade discounts, reducing a certain percentage from the listed price of goods in sales. So they provide trade discounts. So when people are buying from all these wholesalers, they give discounts because they sell in large quantities. So they want to give discounts and push the products to the retailers so they can make profits. They keep a very thin margin. Their profit margin is very thin, but they sell in large quantities. For example, let's say Arali Sahal, they sell in very large quantities. When you see there is 50 kilograms of rice in a one shop, they cater to thousands and thousands of shops. Okay, so they sell in metric tons, not just kilograms. Okay, so let's write the note, and I will read this out. You have to write the subheading as wholesale trade. What is wholesale trade? The purchase of goods for the purpose of reselling is known as the wholesale trade. A person involved in wholesale trading is called a wholesaler. For example, selling 50 kilograms of rice to a retailer, supplying a stock of cement to a contractor for building construction. Shall we rename it? Supplying a stock of cement to a hardware shop. Okay. Try these two examples. Okay, then we'll move on to the next slide. So the characteristics of wholesaler, put the subheading as characteristics of wholesale trade and write these points. Purchasing goods for the purpose of reselling, often selling large quantities of goods in one transaction, selling a few selected items, unit select price is relatively low, providing trade discounts, that is reducing a certain percentage from the listed price of the goods in sale. So write this and then we will move on to the next slide. Okay, then let's move on to the next slide. So next we are going to discuss what are the differences between the retail trade and the wholesale trade. So retail and wholesale are both middlemen engaged in the distributing of retail goods and services to consumers. Okay, so at some point, both the retailers and wholesalers are there in the middle. For example, let's say there is a farmer who is producing rice. Okay, then there is the wholesaler who is buying it from the farmers and then selling it to retailers, and then from retailers final consumers. So they are in the middle. They are the middlemen. However, depending on how the business activities are conducted, the following differences can be observed between the retail trade and the wholesale trade. So these are the differences between the retail trade and the wholesale trade. The objectives of retail trade is to sell goods for the final consumption, retail trade. But if you look at the wholesale trade, objective is to sell for the purpose of reselling. So in the retail trade, as we learn, you are selling for the final consumption. Antimatam, you are the end user. If you are buying it, you are the end user. But wholesale trade, you are buying it for the purpose of reselling. So you are buying it and selling it to someone. So retailers sell different types of goods by understating by understating the consumer needs and wants. So that means retailers are selling different types of goods. Okay. But when you look at the wholesalers are selling only one or limited type of goods. We discuss about the rice example. For example, Aralia rice or Nipuna rice, they are selling rice. But the shops that we are going to buy that rice, okay, if we go and check inside them, they have so many products. So they have different types of goods. Okay. So the retail price is comparatively higher since retailers have to incur additional cost to resell and has to earn a profit as well. Okay. But wholesale price is relatively lower compared to retail price as a result of selling in large quantities and trade discounts. So retailers, they have to buy it and they have to keep it for some time and they have to sell it for different people. Okay. And they have to do the maintenance. For example, let's say they are buying something like curd, then they have to shelf it in a air conditioned fridge. Okay. Cooler fridge. Okay. Likewise, they have to incur additional costs. But wholesalers, they are not like that. They have the cost, but they're selling in large quantities. Okay. So they are keeping a small margin and just pushing the products to the retail traders. Then retail trade goods are often sold at a listed price. Okay. Retail trade, goods are often sold in the listed price. Most of the times we go to shop and buy the goods at retail listed price. But wholesalers are not like that. When they sell products to the retailers, they give a discount. They give a trade discount. Then retailers are well aware of the needs and wants of the consumers as they have the direct contact with them. So retailers know whatever requirements are. They know these are the quantities that they need to buy, and these are the products that they need to buy to sell to the end users. මේ කාලේ නම් ගණන් වැඩි බඩු විකුණන්න බෑ. I can sell only the products that are priced little lower. Okay, likewise they know. But wholesalers, they do not have a direct contact with the consumers and they collect information about consumers through the retailers. From the retailers only, they can get the idea. Okay. We can write this down. Difference between the retail trade and the wholesale trade. Depending on how the business activities are conducted, the following differences can be observed between the retail trade and the wholesale trade. And here's the chart. So take 5 minutes and write this. Okay, now we learned about the domestic trade over the last couple of slides. So we learned about the retail trade and the wholesale trade. Now we are going to learn about the international trade. Okay, international trade is carrying out between two or more countries. So it's a cross-border trade. To fulfill the needs of a country, both domestic and international products are required. This is because a country is not self-sufficient in goods and services required. Now, if we take a country, now so many years back when there was self-sufficient era, everyone had like sort of the things they wanted, they themselves made it. But now if we look at our lives, it's a lot more complicated than 1,000 years back. So what has happened is we have to depend on another country to fulfill our wants. So sometimes it is even needs. For example, let's say we do not have liquid petroleum in Sri Lanka. So definitely we will have to depend for liquid petroleum from a Middle East country or Russia or US or some other place. Okay. So this is because a country is not self-sufficient in the goods and services required. So further, a country also needs to sell its excess production to other countries. Hence, almost all the countries are engaged in international trade. So there are two categories in the international trade. One is import trade, the next one being the export trade. Now, for example, let's look at Sri Lanka. Now we are producing tea. What do? We export it because that tea production is too much for our consumers. So we have a lot of excess and we can sell it to other countries. So international trade is not bad. Only thing is we have to manage the trade balances or the trade balances between countries. Let's say, for example, from a one country, we import $100 worth of goods, and we export only $1 or $2 worth of exports. We now let's say, for example, country A, from country A, my country is country B. From country A, I import 100 rupees worth, $100 worth of imports, but I export only $1 worth of exports. Now that is not going to work. I mean that then there is a trade balance problem between two countries. In an ideal scenario, at least we should have a very sustainable balance. For example, we are exporting and we are importing. For example, we are exporting $100 worth of goods and we are importing uh, $90 worth of goods. Then it's good. Then we will not have all these dollar problems we had. But in countries like ours, what happens is we are importing a lot but exporting a little. Okay. So let's look at what is import trade and export trade. Import trade is bringing goods from a foreign country or countries to this country. This country means our country. For example, purchasing crude oil from Middle East countries, purchasing automobiles from India. Now, export trade is selling domestic goods to a foreign country or countries. For example, selling Sri Lankan tea to European countries, selling apparel products to European countries. Okay, so I hope you understand it, and let's move on to the note. So I will read it out and then you can write it down. International trade. What is international trade? International trade is the trade carried out between two or more countries. Since no country can be meet all its needs on its own, both local and international products are essential. Additionally, countries often sell their surplus production to others. As a result, nearly every country participates in international trade. There are two categories of international trade: import trade and export trade. Write this down. Take 1 minute, 1 to 2 minutes, and quickly write it down. It's not much of a thing. Only thing is, international is the trade between two or more countries. So it's not a domestic trade which is happening inside the country, but you're selling goods out of the country or you're buying goods out of the country into your country. Okay, let's quickly write it down as we are running out of time. Have you finished, Romero? Shall we move on to the next slide?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Then let's write down the next slide. International trade, import trade. Import trade is bringing goods from a foreign country or countries to this country. A country import goods in the following situations. For example, they can't manufacture or produce goods and services. They have a deficit of raw material to produce, or the technology and the processes is insufficient and costly. For example, purchasing crude oil from Middle East countries, purchasing automobiles from India. Let's write this down. Let's move on to the next slide. Export trade. Export trade is selling domestic goods to a foreign country or countries. Basically, if the product is manufactured domestically and traded in foreign country, it is known as export. Basically, if the product is manufactured domestically and traded in a foreign country, it is known as export. A country export goods to fulfill following objectives. For example, sale of surplus production, optimize utilization of domestic resources, earning foreign exchange. For example, selling Sri Lankan tea to European countries and selling Sri Lankan apparel products to European countries. Okay. Take a couple of minutes and write this, and with that, we will be concluding the today's session.